This series of 9 videos is about our vacation in 2017. Yellowstone was the focus of the trip, but the journey there and back meant as much as Yellowstone itself. Part 8 takes place on September 19th and 20th and includes our last day in Yellowstone and the day after in Colorado. After a day warm enough to swim in the boiling river, this is what we woke up to on the morning of the 19th. With more in the forecast, we gave up on the last 2 nights we were supposed to be in Yellowstone and decided to head to Colorado. On our way out of Yellowstone, we were supposed to be driving beside Yellowstone Lake and seeing the grand vistas beyond, but obviously the weather wasn't cooperating. We did get glimpses of the lake nearby, but nothing spectacular. No matter what the weather was like, there was one stop I wanted to make before we left. The West Thumb Geyser Basin. As it turned out, right as we arrived at West Thumb, the sun came out. Right at the beginning of the boardwalk, there was another elk with snow-covered antlers. There were springs here similar to the ones in other parts of the park. But here, there were also some unique geysers because they were right on the lake. And even in the lake. Fishing Cone was exposed like this when we were there, but sometimes it is actually underwater if the lake level is higher. The water was crystal clear. Lakeshore Geyser was not only on the shoreline but was active. First the back hole, and then the front. From Lakeshore Geyser, you could look down the shore to Fishing Cone, big cone geysers. Right about here, we had the best visibility of the day. Continuing along the boardwalk, there were more pools, and even mud pots. And there was a great view of the lake. The birds were coming out. And it was a great way to end our trip to Yellowstone. Back in the parking lot, Rebecca found one more raven to play with before we left. We left the park the way we entered, through the south entrance. That led us to Jackson Hole and Grand Teton National Park. We were hoping for some views like this, but all we got was this. The sun seemed like it was trying to break through, but it never did. The horses were in the sun, just not the mountains behind them. Guess we'll have to go back to the Tetons. At the south end of Jackson Hole is the town of Jackson and the Snake River Brewery. This was one of the better breweries I've been to for both beer and food. With a view of Snow King Mountain from our table, it was a great lunch stop. We pushed south and out of Jackson Hole and drove through the town of Pinedale and along the western side of the Wind River Range. We stopped in the town of Farson for massive ice cream cones. Yes, we were just in snow a few hours earlier, but it was warm here. Our day was to end at Rock Springs. On the northern edge of town, we saw a sign for wild horse corrals. Knowing that corrals hold things in, making them not wild, I was curious. The signs at the area explained that it is necessary to round up the wild horses occasionally, or they would overrun the vegetation in Wyoming. With few predators, that would leave the population to starve and the landscape to be damaged. So the BLM rounds up wild horses and puts some up for adoption. The website for information listed on the sign is incorrect, so I've listed the correct link below. I am not a horse expert by any means, but it seemed to me like these had longer manes and tails than domestic horses. This one in particular seemed to show some interest in us and started walking towards us. We weren't right at the fence, so she stopped. We said our goodbyes and called it a day. The next morning, we headed for Colorado and the Roaring Fork Valley. Driving south through Wyoming was desolate, but the roads were good. As soon as we entered Colorado, the road became dirt and stayed that way for 30 miles. In this stretch, Rebecca found a picturesque old house. Eventually, we reached our destination of Aspen. We saw more horses on the street, but our main goal was to visit the Aspen Brewing Company. It was kind of a tiny little place, but it had a great view of the mountain. We also stopped at the Red Onion, one of the oldest establishments in town. We left Aspen and headed back down the valley to our campsite on the other side of Mount Sopris. The Crystal River KOA had a great view of the mountain. Plus, it had Wi-Fi, so Z was happy even if she didn't look it. This is where we ended our day, and it was the warmest night of the whole trip. Part 9 takes us to Rocky Mountain National Park for the end of the trip.